Welcome to Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames. Today we'll be talking about 2014's Nightcrawler, written and directed by Dan Gilroy and starring Jake Gyllenhaal. I'm Abe Epperson, and I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Michael Swaim. Man, that was the most... why you laugh? Why you laugh?
I don't know.
Oh,
I
okay.
just like talking to you, buddy.
I like talking to you, man. Wow.
Yeah.
But that was
Wow.
I was going to applaud you, and then the laugh kind of derailed it. Otherwise, that would have been a completely professional beginning to a podcast. Like perfectly
really? Yeah,
serviceable, real material.
Yeah.
That's how you slate, baby.
Yeah. Before we continue, I'd like to introduce our guest this afternoon.
He can't be derailed.
Guest,
I'm trying, and he won't listen, folks.
Introduce yourself.
I am Jason Pargin, aka David Wong, and to this day, I've never heard any podcast intro that was not just a disaster. Like, it's just, it doesn't matter what show, no one has mastered the art of just effortlessly getting into the show.
He came in with a chuckle as well, and I hope we chuckle throughout, and I think we will.
Oh, it's gonna be a bunch of chuckles.
It's gonna be a chuckle fest
in this movie about a sociopath.
Oh, okay. Now a lot of it makes more sense. Did you already said the name, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I should have gotten
I'm
excited then, but copy and paste that to this to that moment. Man, I have been wanting to cover this movie for so long. What a goddamn good movie. Like,
it's such a pleasure to have you, man.
Yeah, sung to the tune of Bone Tomahawk, that old classic Bone Tomahawk, Nightcrawler. Yeah. Just Nightcrawler. Man, it's so fucking good. Jason, thank you so much for picking this movie. You picked it off our list of possibles, and I know there were particular reasons you immediately gravitated to it, so let's start there. Why Nightcrawler?
Well, most people who are familiar with me do not know this about me, which is that I, like the character in this movie, used to be a creepy weirdo.
Oh, I thought you were going to say film traffic accidents.
But also worked in local news and
there we go.
Actually got out of it partly for the reason this creepy weirdo thrives in it, which I did not have the stomach for it. Now, I was not working in a big market with, gruesome shootings every 20 seconds, but it was the same kind of deal where you're having to go to a house fire and the family and the children are crying on the lawn as they watch everything they have in the world be burned up. And our job is to put a camera in their face and ask them how they feel about it. It's, we'll get into it because what this movie obviously is a very, heightened version of it. But the problems with local media, that kind of thing, is very real.
Yeah,
that's it. That's interesting. I'm glad to get that perspective.
If you haven't seen it, I'm going to nutshell spoil it really quick so we can get on with the proceedings, because I think this is one where there's tons to unpack, and it's a relatively straightforward story. I'll put it as simply as possible. I'll truly elevator it. A young, hungry sociopath ends up in a symbiotic relationship with a local newsroom manager, played by Jake Gyllenhaal and Rene Russo, respectively, by which he films tragedies for the local news. This escalates to the point where he is interfering in the crime scenes, staging crime scenes, and ultimately increasingly manipulating and coercing everyone around him, including one of the only other characters, his intern Rick, I think, and ultimately thrives amidst the chaos and becomes a very successful businessman. And there's a bunch of details in there, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And did it get a lot of fanfare at the time? Do you know, Abe? I don't recall this, like, Nightcrawler really lighting up the airwaves.
It actually did really well.
Oh,
in fact, Dan Gilroy, this is his directorial debut, he had written some stuff before, and there was some buzz around, like, the screenings of this, and there was, like, an actual, like, bidding war between some, like, A24, Focus, Fox Searchlight, Weinstein Company. All these companies were trying to get the distribution rights in the United States for it, and it performs pretty well. It had a budget about $8.5 million, and box office was about 50. So it released to good critical acclaim. Had a it's an indie film, obviously, so the ceiling and the floor are a little tempered. But it did as well as one can expect a indie feature to do.
DP Robert Elswit, we should also mention. Probably right behind Deakins as our idol in that department.
He's most famously, he's the cinematographer for Paul Thomas Anderson. Mm-hmm. So he shot like Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood and stuff like that.
Did he do Punch Drunk?
He also did Punch Drunk, yes.
And
Colors, Abe. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
So did this director, after the success of this, did he get rewarded with a Marvel movie, as is the path now, where you have one minor hit and you're either directing Superwoman or something?
He didn't direct, but he's only directed 3 things, and I think he only directs when it's his project. But after this, immediately he got hired to write Kong Skull Island. So,
which he
basically
didn't direct,
the same movie.
Right?
They're saying he didn't direct.
He directed Roman J. Israel Esquire, which I don't know anything about, and Velvet Buzzsaw, which I did see, another Gyllenhaal on Netflix.
And Rene Russo, because they're married. He's married to Rene Russo. I don't know why that's...
Oh.
It's all a small club,
Jake
I guess.
Gyllenhaal's married to Rene Russo, or Dan Gilroy married to
Dan Gilroy is. It's all
did
just
not
a
know that.
club.
Yeah.
And the editor is his brother. It's like, this is not... Yeah, I don't know.
That's not the point of this podcast, damn it. What's... Okay, great. Well, I'm on the record as loving the movie. Let's go around the horn and do that little game, because we haven't, Abe, did this movie grab you as much as it did me? I always put it up there with Whiplash, which came out in relatively the same era, and they feel like companion movies to me in terms of the intensity I felt.
Yeah, and in terms of character perspective and the structure of the film. Yeah, of course I do, dude.
Okay, great.
You know this.
Same brain.
I love it. I love this movie. It's a nice little dense little nugget. It's I think it's got it's not got a good message. It's just got a very interesting message. But yeah, character perspective, meaning that you're following a sociopath or a villain as your protagonist. Structurally, this movie is Taxi Driver.
Structurally, it's very straightforward, I would say. Would you agree? I would teach this in film class because it rips, it keeps you focused, so you keep the students' attention. And I think, as we'll get into, probably the bulk of the episode will be, it's fraught with conversation starters about the nature of media, which would be great for film studies. And C, on a screenplay perspective, it is a well-made film, meaning it's traditional classic 3-act structure, just done elegantly. Just everything's correct. The way Dan Harmon obsessively always does traditional structure. He's the master of doing it right and just doing it. Nightcrawler is I feel like Dan Gilroy just started with a movie, man. Capital M, that's what a movie is. And,
and you and I really like efficiency. Mm-hmm. That's we have real big hard-ons for that, and so we're gonna like a film like this. The last thing, I guess, not the last thing. You have a hard-on.
I have a boner because that's more efficient.
Sure. Stylistically and cinematographically, doesn't this feel like a love sonnet to Fincher? When you watch this movie, doesn't it look like Fincher to you? I don't know.
Do you mean get that vibe? Because of Elswit's choices or because of the directing choices? I think that would land more on Elswit. And yes, I do. Yes, I agree.
But it's the dark themes, and I don't know. We're talking about this in the other podcast that I do, the Director Piece Theater, about how all films during this time started to slowly look like this type of movie. But I think this one is genuinely they intended it to be that way. It wasn't just an artifact of how the zeitgeist and how the industry had been moving visually. This is more of intentionally, this should look like Zodiac or something like that.
That's true.
But yeah, that's kind of my perspective on this, or an overarching thing.
Yeah, the stuff I love about it definitely lands on the screenplay side, just meaning a lot of it is visual, but I mean, there are things that you would know if you read the screenplay, if you know what I mean. Like the first shot is a blank billboard that's white and like has tatters on it, and then it immediately cuts to a shot where in roughly the same position in frame is the full white moon with gray spots on it. And a thing that is a recurring theme is that he's a coyote, right? He's an LA coyote, Gyllenhaal. And so it's like the thing that moves a coyote to howl, that like resonates with its spirit, is the full moon. For our character, it's a blank billboard, which represents the opportunity to make a sale, like the blank space where someone's mind could be coerced and manipulated. That to him is the full moon to his coyote. That is so fucking cool to me. And I don't know that like Fincher framing it affects the meaning, but it just affects the... I think there's less to say about the directing than there is about literally like the bones of what is in the movie. But I turn to you to be like, what is notable about the visual style? Does Dan Gilroy have a visual style that you can discern of his own?
I'm not well versed enough in his work yet to really tell you, because he's only done like 3 things. I've only seen 2 of them, and they both have Jake Gyllenhaal, but they're vastly different. There's more on a lot of this stuff. Like, I love the coyote thing because I noticed that this watch through that when after he his house story is his big break, you know, like that he has by like breaking and entering, after it runs on TV, there's a commercial that has slogan "Dinner is complete," and I was like, "Oh, it's like he's like an animal. He's like an animal, he's just like got his feast.
Like a coyote. He's
like a coyote.
It's one of those symbolic through lines that they milk so hard every second that it just works. It's just satisfying.
There's even wolves.
He's always
like,
a coyote. You're surprised in how many different ways he's a coyote. It's great.
He looks like a coyote.
I would have never picked
anyway,
up on that.
I want to hear. I actually am very interested in Jason's perspective.
Yeah, we gotta let Jason talk. That's why the people tuned in. Let's be
have
honest.
at it. Talk about what you want. But I am very interested about your perspective in terms of, as you mentioned, you worked in local news.
Yeah, that's the thing about Jason is you can just say, okay, say the very thoughtful spiel that you prepared. Now go. There's no segue needed.
I guess it didn't occur to me that the word rate in the title, that part of it is we're having like an opinion on whether or not the movie is good or bad. And it would just be great if I had come on here to just destroy this movie. Just tell you how you're completely wrong.
Move right now.
And I had evidence that the coyote stuff was just an accident or something like that. But no, so for one thing, you said it was the DP that it had in common with There Will Be Blood.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because there's obviously not like a story connection here, but this movie has the type of character arc that I like, and There Will Be Blood has the same thing where the character does not change during the movie. The arc is you finding out more about them. So kind of in the same way, like Daniel Plainview is obviously the same man at the end, but as he meets each like moral challenge and he keeps like crossing a boundary, you learn what he is and what he'll do and how far he'll go. And this is the same thing. Like, what's Jake Gyllenhaal's character's name in the movie? Lou something?
Lou
Bloom.
Yeah.
Lou does not change, but what happens is as you go and he keeps crossing these boundaries, and we can even tick them off, and they hit, as you mentioned, exactly where they're supposed to in the structure. Like at exactly 60 minutes, he crosses another boundary. And not because he has learned or changed. He's not going to learn or change ever. It's you discovering what he is and what he won't do and how he thinks. And I like that because it's instead of the traditional thing where like a hero's journey where this person has to find something within themselves or whatever. The horror is in you seeing more of like the landscape of his psychology and as it unfolds. And as he confronts each of these people, and then obviously the overall theme is, the scary part is how well, just like in There Will Be Blood, how perfectly he fits into capitalism. Like, that this slimy reptile of a person is like perfectly geared for what the market wants, which is, someone who will cross the police tape and put a camera right in the face of a dying person, because we want to see it. And then we at home don't like to think about how you got that shot. But it doesn't matter. It's, competition says whoever has the most, graphic footage or whatever wins. And so it's a format that I love, where it's like, this is a type of person where this is what you have to be to some degree to survive in this world. Obviously, again, it's a much more lurid and it's a fictionalized version of it. But to some degree, being a journalist, even being a great journalist, is all about being willing to like violate social norms, violate people's privacy, to kind of like, you can't be a polite journalist. You just can't. It's just hopefully comes out when you're like talking to a corrupt politician.
Yeah, we imagine it when you're like, "Excuse me, sir, this isn't right," but not when you're like, "Your house is burning down. Talk about it. Come on, we need the footage. Go."
Yeah. Also, you're stepping in my light. It's like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because that was the thing that was discouraging to me, because I went to school, I got a journalism degree, and then even before I graduated, I got a job as a morning producer at our local ABC affiliate, which may sound impressive, but it was a small city. So like the market was not covering any of the major cities around us. So the viewership was not that high, but it was still a real like local TV operation. Mm-hmm. But what's discouraging about it is not like the times when we would intentionally like arrange a crime. Like we, of course, would not do that unless it was really light on news that day. But you realize very fast that you're making an entertainment product. Because, for example, we would cover a house fire, which, to be honest, is not news. It's a house burn down. Like you don't know these people. If it was like a serial arsonist, there may be some interest to the viewers, but
it's not your business in some ways. It doesn't matter. Yeah, you didn't need to inject that trauma into your brain necessarily.
But we would cover house fire if we had flame footage. Charred post-fire footage, we wouldn't. Right. That's not news. It's news because flames a burning house looks amazing. And they used to talk about getting the wall collapse shot. If there's like a big building structure fire and there's a moment when one of the walls falls in and there's a big like belching ball of flame, and that's like your teaser shot. That can tease the newscast. When you open up the newscast, you got the quick montage of the stories. It's like, boom, there's your teaser. Like that's what you're looking for. And
that's the sizzle, kid.
Yeah, and just like as is depicted in this movie, if you get there a few minutes too late, you missed the news, which logically that's insane, because the thing that happened, an old warehouse burned down, is the same either way. But in TV news, it's about what you can show people. And with local news here, like when they talk, because the whole premise, this guy does not work for the TV station. He's a stringer, is what is the language we would use. He's a freelancer, where they go out, and because again, a TV station cannot employ that many full-time camera crews and news crews, so you buy from these freelancers that will get you the shot of the car accident, because you can get the information from the cops or from their press release, but the visuals, you have to have somebody who happened to be there. So this job does exist. Now, I'm sure it's not as sleazy as it's depicted here, but everything you're covering is based around these limitations. Like, for instance, at the station where I worked, we had 2 vans so you could have 2 camera crews. So crew is just the reporter and the camera person.
Oh, you Bill Paxton'd it. That's his big plan in the movie, is to get 2 vans and cover each half of the city. And for that slight, of course, Lou Bloom has to kill him ultimately.
Right. But when you think about it, we were covering a pretty large area. So you're literally, in order to cover a story, it's got to be something where the van can get there, get video, and then get back in time to edit it for the show. So when you're picking what news you're going to cover that day, it's literally which 2 things that are less than a van drive away where we
Our
can
most dramatic.
we can
looking.
spend
We'll be on fire.
Yeah, we can spend 20 minutes there filming whatever and then get back. And so that's how you decide what you're going to cover. It's because you don't have infinite ability to dispatch people.
News is nonsense. Yeah, it's just really revealing.
What she talks about, Rene Russo's character, and I think her title is the news director at that station, is... Yeah. Or I think Jake Gyllenhaal actually throws these stats in her face. Did they overwhelmingly cover crime and accidents and spend a tiny, tiny amount of time per year, like minutes a year, on things that are big policy things, changes in the law, stuff that you need to know. And otherwise, it's just, drive-by shootings, accidents, building fires. If a plane ever crashed, like that's amazing footage.
Which is why, he immediately, as a sociopath, calls them out on their bullshit, because their bullshit is a place where he can thrive. He's like, I can get you this, and I'll prove to you that it's valuable to you. But of course, it's also just a great screenwriting trick again, because in a way that doesn't feel forced, Dan Gilroy gets to drop in this really depressing data block that sort of washes over you about local news's priorities. It's a great scene.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Well, no, but and in general, also, like, he as a character symbolizes the system, because when you hear his thought processes, it's always just pure like calculation. Like, here's how much leverage I have in this conversation. Here's what I require from you. And he talks like it's just the bottom line. He's a specific kind of sociopath where he doesn't enjoy suffering necessarily. He's just figured out, oh, this is what you want? Okay, I'll get it. That's it. There's nothing else to be considered here. There's no emotion. And that's the way the market works. If you're competing with these other stations, no sentimentality or any kind of like noble notions about the role of news in society, that doesn't play into it. If this is what people want to watch, this is what they get.
Two small things on that. I love how they do, one, his relationship with Rene Russo. He speaks about it because he's basically trying to get her to have sex with him at a certain point, and he like describes it as a mutually like beneficial kind of arrangement, and so that shows that even in romantic, like, his solve for romance and for is to
explain to someone why they have to be with him.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I thought it's a nice touch that in the movie, he doesn't have any friends or anything, but he takes care of a plant. Mm-hmm. And I just like the idea of him not like taking care of something that's not human. That's easy to take care of. You can be a sociopath and take care of a plant very easily. You don't have to be connected. There's no back and forth. It's just a order of events. Water it, and that's it.
But the scene you're referring to, I just want to underscore what an amazing horror scene that is, because I think that's one of the most impactful scenes of, like Jason said, his agenda unfolding. Like, you don't understand how far he's gonna go, and as the scene continues on, it's just people talking, and yet you feel dawning horror like you would in a monster movie because of what nature of beast is man of it all, like of the fact that, he's going to pursue that tactic. And it's just refreshing to me as someone who has written scripts for so long and thinks of what could this character do next that'll really wow him, that'll really jazz him and be like fresh. When you see something like this and you're like, wow, it went farther than I could imagine. And I spent all my time trying to imagine how far characters can go. And they didn't do it because like he stood up and killed someone. It's just the tactics that he's employing are unforgivable, and that's so awesome. And I think that's why it just occurs to me that's one of the ways it resonates with Whiplash, because I have that same feeling about the sequence where the car accident happens and you're like, all right, better hit the old dusty trail. That's that sequence. Wow, really went out with a bang. And then he gets up and walks away from the car accident and keeps going, and you're like, I didn't know you could go that far. This is amazing. I don't know what the fuck is gonna happen next. So yeah, it's the iceberg effect, and slowly understanding how cold he is. and how well that's suited to Renee Russo, who is like good at her job, quote unquote, because she has grand plans to build a narrative. Like I would say, I mean, Jason, back me up or correct me, but I feel like she seems excellent at her job, or she also is fitting her function perfectly at the news station by like building entertainment narratives. She doesn't just take whatever is given to her and say, this is what happened, so this is what we report. She takes the potential story beats available to her and thinks about what the season arc of the news is going to be.
I don't know that anyone, if there was anyone who was thinking in those terms, they didn't say it out loud. It's more just everyone, not in the newsroom, but the people on the station. Because again, when you own a TV station, the news is the entire thing. Like the TV station, it was literally just a studio with the news in an office where they sell ad space. So when I talk about like local TV and local TV news, they're kind of one and the same. Whatever business owns that local affiliate, the news that's like their main profit driver. It's kind of like the crown jewel, because that's the one thing they actually make. So the needs of the business and the needs to get people to watch, you don't have to be told that the threat of violence sells. You don't have to be told that when like I'm from tornado country, and if there's a tornado warning, that if you cut into programming, that you're going to get incredible ratings. So they do it at every opportunity because people want to know if they're going to die. That you don't need to sit down and have a meeting saying, look, people, we're trying to scare white people into watching our show. They don't need to say that. But we did have, how whenever there's like a big storm coming, not like a hurricane, but like a winter storm, they'll name it something clever. And we've even, they joke about it on The Simpsons, like a class 5 kill storm or something like that.
Bearing down on us like a shotgun full of snow.
Yeah, or like they'll call it the Arctic mega blast. Well, we had a meeting about that, about the need to brand a story, because then you claim it as your own. So that if there's been some like a big plane crash or something, you come up with a name for that, a catchy name, and then you use that throughout the broadcast, and then now you've claimed it as like you own that story because you named it. The same as whatever genius named the Watergate scandal Watergate. Right. Like now that's a part of the language. That somebody named it that and started calling it that, the Watergate scandal, instead of the Nixon break-in scandal, or instead of something else. Like putting that term on there, and it was so catchy and it stuck in the language. So the fact that it's a business, it's the same as working at a website. You're not allowed to forget it for more than 5 minutes. Like it's a business. And as we now know, obviously people listening to this, if you don't realize, like Donald Trump is president. Mm-hmm. And one way that happened was in America, even though like violent crime has been dropping since the 90s, since the crack epidemic, fear of violent crime keeps going up and up and up.
Right.
And we blame like Fox News for that, or the internet. It's really local news that drives that, because they will spend half of their broadcast and the thing she talked about, that your audience are people who live in safe neighborhoods. And you need to scare them into the idea that the chaos of the cities is coming to you. Because this is the thing, is that people scared of crime vote Trump, and then you hear that people in rural areas vote Trump, and the crime is mostly concentrated in the cities, but the cities vote Democrat. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would the people who live in these relatively peaceful areas go for the anti-crime candidate using like all these racist dog whistles about inner city crime, things like that? Mm-hmm. It's because they sit down, they watch local news, and they hear about how in the nearby city, it's just a bloodbath. It's just nonstop. There's another child that's been murdered. And the people who are most scared of crime are people in peaceful suburbs and small towns these are the people who buy the assault rifles. These are the people who are passionate about having guns at arm's length, even though they will live their entire lives and never have a break-in. Meanwhile, somebody that lives in the city has had a break-in once a year for 5 straight years, and they just kind of live with it, and they don't necessarily get caught up in that same narrative about like, we've got to crack down, we've got to stop these animals, these thugs, or whatever slur they want to use, where everyone knows what they actually mean. Mm-hmm. That's local news, because there's even a term for it. They call it mean world syndrome. It's where if you watch a lot of TV and local news, you will come away thinking that you're in a world of just deathly violence and that you're on the verge of being shot to death at any moment. Or, so.
Oh, there was a very interesting similar study about how beat cops become racist because they'll work the night shift in a neighborhood that's predominantly one ethnic group, and they only interface with that ethnic group because they don't have friends other than other cops or white people who have committed crimes, and their brain just thinks, oh, all fill in the blanks commit crimes. It's like becomes a subconscious reinforcement that is like demonstrably. They did a thing where they just switched, like rotated who took the night and day shift, and found that the police force became immediately less. I mean, there's way more problems with I'm a defund guy, but let's not get into that. I mean, I guess let's get into it because it's kind of what the movie's about. I do think that's why Lou Bloom, which by the way, how great is it that his name sounds like a coyote howling?
Yeah.
Lou Bloom. But anyway, he's racist. Like we see several instances where, and he doesn't really have hate in him. So he's not racist out of fear and hate in the way that your average racist, usually I would say the bulk of racists are racist because they fear, and fear leads to hate. But he is racist in that racism appeals to him because it mathematically sorts people. It's like him saying, no, you do this, society. You value people by skin color, so I adopt that because I'm trying to navigate with efficiency to the top of society. So he uses racism continuously throughout the movie when he's like, no, we don't want those kind of victims they have in that neighborhood, or this will work better if the shootout happens in a white neighborhood. He understands the narrative that Rene Russo is building and is giving her what she wants. And it's just so interesting to me that makes so much horrible sense that a sociopath, racism would appeal to them because you don't have to understand people if you can sort them by race. It's a system that makes sense to a sociopath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the elements of horror that I love. This is not a horror film, but kind of what you were talking about.
Thriller, I guess.
Yeah. But what you were talking about in that moment where they're at the Mexican place, there's like they understand that there's a horrifying thought, and then once that sticks with you, it like you can't leave you in a very effective way. And one way that they kind of pull that off is that you realize that like he's not making the argument that like society, you are this way and I'm just a reflection of you. Like that, it's less about him making an argument and more about just what could one do? Like what could one person actually get away with? Is like, and then you have that moment where you look at like Rene Russo plays it very, very well, where she has that moment where she realizes, oh, that's what this is. That's what this conversation is all about. You just want to fuck me. And she kind of just like her
super
entire
well written scene and well acted scene.
Yeah. And her entire energy changes because then she knows like, oh, okay, this is what this is now. And it's basically this movie to me feels like just a series of reveals of that twist, and we just keep getting darker and darker and darker and pushing further and further and further, and then reflectively saying that's success, that he's a virus that is infecting like this world. And every time that he gets a victory, he's given more money for it, The
horror is watching our protagonist succeed. Yeah,
exactly.
Can I read some lines from that scene so I can cross them off my notes? In that scene, he says the line, "I want to be the guy that owns the station, that owns the camera," which I just really love his like gluttony for getting,
stuff.
Up and up and up.
Yeah.
And that's when he drops the whole data block about what they're interested in and explains his value and explains that I'd also like to be close to you. I like older women. And then he says, I want that with you, just like you want to keep your job and your health insurance. And that's the tip off. And that is such a fucking creepy good tip off. Mm. Later on, the lines I wrote are, the true price of any item is what someone's willing to pay for it. She says, friends don't pressure friends to fuck them. And he says, they do. A friend is a gift you give yourself, which I just love his complete sociopathic misunderstanding, because that pairs with the opening sequence, which is, by the way, screenwriters, great trick. At the end of the movie, Rick will say it to him. That's for the people in the back who need it spelled out for them. Rick says, you know what your problem is, man? You don't fucking understand people. But the thing is, we already knew that. That's just crystallizing. Now, a bad movie would have that line in the beginning, because they wouldn't understand how to get it across any other way. But a good movie has that line at the end because it's just a crystallizing resonance. At the beginning, what you see is him trying to get a job on a construction site after selling them stolen goods. And you can tell that he's very smart and he's a very good salesman. But the guy shuts him down with the simple line, why would I hire a fucking thief? And that shows but doesn't tell, oh, he's really smart, but he doesn't understand basic things about how humans work. Like, that's why he lost in that situation. That's very obvious. Like, why would you try to get hired by someone after immediately after trying to sell them stolen goods? But he just doesn't understand the basic shit. And I think in the same way, a friend is a gift you give yourself means that making friends with people enriches your life. But he takes it to mean a friend is something you take and give to yourself by force. I love, like, it's like Lucille. Yeah. It's like Lucille Bluth saying, "Hurt people, hurt people." I like that.
Yeah. That's what I was saying though about the character is kind of there to symbolize capitalism, because you hear him say things like, you keep talking about his leverage in a situation, or like, you know, you will do this for me because you want this, and the price of something is what somebody's willing to pay. That, you know, everything is just stripped down to, he almost plays the part like an alien who came to Earth and put on a human suit and is just trying to learn the rules of humanity. And so, because he keeps citing like, well, I looked this up and I looked up this slogan and I looked up these stats, and that's how he knows, like, that's partly how he knows to exploit racism. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, white people are scared of inner city crime coming to the suburbs, so you need white victim, you know, a minority assailant. That's the good stuff. Let's go find that. And it's just a pure cold calculation. He's not trying to advance the cause of white supremacy. He wouldn't care enough about that. He just calculated this gets you the most money at the, you know, the shortest possible time. And with her, like, he has decided that he likes being alone because it lets him get away with things. You don't have to explain yourself. But he has certain physical needs, so he'll just make her give it to him because he has leverage. And there's no sentiment. There's no like worrying about how she feels about it. It's just, it's all bottom line. He's just like a robot or a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And how good is her delivery? I love that you never see a sex scene between them, because it would be so fucking horrible. I mean, it's coerced sex. But you get it all from her delivery the next day when he fails to deliver a good clip. And she goes, I want what you fucking promised me. It's like, that wrenched my heart out. Like, you understand everything she went through. Now I want the fucking goods, you piece of shit. Rene Russo, I think, just slays in her scenes all throughout.
Yeah, because it's also about playing the balance of she's also a monster.
Yes.
It's her narrative, so there's not a lot of sympathy for the devil here, but you do see how she is slightly more connected to humanity, and she doesn't seem entirely sociopathic. She just seems like evilish.
She's like a normal person who justifies evil things to herself,
right,
but she's not a sociopath. I agree.
Yeah, she doesn't make mistakes like he does either. I love that one moment where they're driving, following the SUV.
Poor Rick.
And Lou, with his money, bought this tacky red Charger. You know, like, it's not a good car to follow someone with. Of course,
it's a good car for a coyote, though.
Yeah, but obviously for Lou, that doesn't matter, because he's going to get in there and get what he needs and be gone before that matters, because
he just wants to go fast.
He just wants to go fast. And
well, it's also a common thing among sociopaths, and I think this is played out in the movie, that they are adrenaline junkies because it approximates being able to feel something. So I think he drives fast. The job appeals to him because of the adrenaline rush of it all. I think that is an aspect of his voraciousness.
Yeah. And I think Rene Russo wouldn't make those kinds of mistakes, doesn't fall for that kind of stuff, is just very opportunistic in her approach. And also, I like that they added that she's like also tired. You know, there's a little bit of like, man, I just thought I'd be in a better place in my career, so I'm going to be desperate. I'm going to make desperate Hail Mary passes. And that's a reality of capitalism. You know,
there's also
some people do that.
Sorry.
No.
There's also a little bit of local journalism inside baseball in there that you guys may have missed, where they mentioned kind of in passing that she never stays at a station for more than 2 years. That she kind of hops from contract to contract, and she's in a situation where it's clear she would like to stay there because she's made it to LA. And this is something where the other issue I had with working in the industry is that if you are working at a very small TV station, the way you advance and get a promotion is not by getting a better job at that station. It's by moving to a bigger market. So if you're a photographer in whatever, Champaign, Illinois, some medium-sized city like that, you're looking to get a job in Chicago. And if you're in Chicago, you're looking to get a job in New York or LA. Like you're constantly looking at, you're just moving, because every time you're advancing in your career, it's not, oh, I got promoted from photographer to senior photographer. It's like I got promoted from being a photographer in small town to medium city, and then from there to Miami or whatever.
Yeah, we see that. I mean, we saw that. I haven't worked for a lot of corporations, but the ones that I have worked with, I've always noticed that not the general manager, but like the CEOs and the higher ups, they move on very quickly.
Yeah.
You know,
here's why,
and I think that it's just the industry type.
Here's why that's a problem in journalism. This is why they intentionally added that to this movie. Is in journalism, to do it right. Like if you're working for a proud newspaper that's been covering the same city for a long time, you want reporters that have been there for 40 years because they learn everything about the history of the city council and about the different neighborhoods and how they interact and the different trends with the neighborhoods and where they're going and all these really important things that are the lifeblood of the city, about all of the subcultures and all that. And so the people that have been there for decades, have been good journalists for decades, they know on a first name basis all the city officials. They know who to call at all these different organizations and institutions to find out the real bottom line about what's going on. They build up a great network of sources who will leak them things about some scandal or about the important stuff that journalism is supposed to do, which is be a check on corporate power, government power, by informing the public and keeping them on top of what's happening. You know, and so you have this, you imagine like an old movie type newspaper journalist, you picture like a guy with a cigar and, and he's working the phones or knocking on doors and stuff like that. When you build a world of TV news, the reputation it has is that you have a bunch of anchors and reporters who all aspire to like work in entertainment somehow. Like they wish they had been actors or something like that. And when they just hop from city to city, they don't have any kind of like of those roots or the deeper understanding of the culture or anything like that. They don't have any kind of a sense of the history and trying to like orient their audience about what they need to know. They're just there to try to get a certain number of ratings and bring in a certain amount of revenue so they can get the bigger and better job elsewhere. Like they don't have any local roots. So that's like always been a criticism of TV news, of local TV news, the way it's happened now is that like none of those people are of the community. They went to school in LA, got a job in Colorado because that was the opening they could find. And the moment they arrived there, they immediately started dreaming of a job in New York. And so after a few years, they'll be gone.
Yeah.
So does that mean she's succeeded her way to LA like that? Because that's a big market, I would assume.
Yeah, but it also
is the fact that she's the night shift mean she's not at the top.
Correct. She's still got a lot of room.
Okay.
That's not the job anybody wants because you're obviously the hours and then like the ratings are lower and she's at the lowest of the three. So she's made it high enough in the industry that she's probably doing well. but clearly, kind of wishes. And again, like women in a lot of industries, the way they get treated once they reach a certain age, and they intentionally cast someone who is perceived as being like on the edge of losing their beauty or whatever. So in an industry that kind of favors a lot of very shallow stuff, and there's even the part where Jake Gyllenhaal's like, "Well, you're way prettier than," he like names the anchor of the nighttime news or whatever. So they intentionally chose someone who had a lot of years in the business, but probably was unsatisfied with where they were, and that they hop around, but really emphasizing that this person doesn't know these neighborhoods. She's purely, like you mentioned earlier, that they're like coming up with the story arcs. Well, that's how she sees it. Like, she came from wherever she came from. Maybe she did, was news in Pittsburgh before this, or Houston or whatever, and just came in saying, okay, white people in the suburbs are scared of inner city crime. Get me that. Like, she only understands it on that level. She doesn't understand the storytelling on any deeper level, because what does she know about LA?
She doesn't
What
live
does she
there.
know about,
Yeah.
the way these minority communities interact with the suburbs? What does she know? She's just bringing this very simplistic playbook of blood and guts sell. And so that's what you're going to get me.
Yeah.
How do we fix it, Jason?
There's a when I was researching this, there's a wonderful Life Imitates Art story that I found, which was that, so Gyllenhaal is in Venice Beach, right? This is when he steals the bike, right? And he puts his hair in a man bun to play the part of like someone who would be, like good at bicycles, I guess. I don't know. I'm not good at bicycle. But so the paparazzi, real life paparazzi, which have a similar like kind of job to this guy. They're kind of all not necessarily coyotes. Yeah, I mean, they're kind of like coyotes, but they're also kind of like hyenas. They're like,
sure,
well, let's just bite everything
chattering
we can from
away
the bun.
at you.
They took a photo of his man bun and released it. They sold it to a magazine that released it with like, this is his new look, even though it's just him in a movie. And it's People magazine. And it also went with a poll saying that most Americans did not approve of the man bun, which is also like entirely fictional.
It's just
it's
man,
just creating
the Termitic
stories.
bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're just like us. I loved how authentically, like, fully half of the people he interacted with were like, "Who the fuck are you?" when he tried to get the interview. As Jason said, I never thought about local news shots and the actual process of how the sausage is made. And they must, what a, like I understood it about paparazzis because that's infiltrated my world enough, but what a bullshit job, because you're also probably getting yelled at most of the time. And the people are right to be like the guy who's like, get the camera the fuck out of I'm on the phone with 911 now.
Yeah.
What a terrible job. But someone's got to do it. But that's the thing, is we don't have to do it. We don't have to do that.
Yeah, we don't.
Except in driver's ed. That's the only time we need to see this horrible shit. You traumatize us once.
The thing is, if they had made another version of this movie where he was instead a paparazzi, or like he was trying to get celebrity dirt or whatever, it wouldn't have worked. Because a lot of times we don't really feel sorry for celebrities anyway. And it's like, look, if you didn't want a bunch of cameras following you after you leave a restaurant with a woman who's not your wife, then you shouldn't have been a celebrity. Like, it's hard to get the audience's sympathy for that. And I think this is something that's so much more interesting because people don't realize that all journalism is kind of a version of that. And that you are routinely destroying someone's life, like when you cover a story.
Right. I think, and that's, again, just the efficiency of the structure of this thing. That's why it has so few characters, and each character is the perfect, basically raises the stakes sacrifice in sequence. It's like, first he absorbs and destroys Rene Russo, who is Bill Paxton first. He absorbs and destroys. And that Bill Paxton was kind of antagonizing him. So we're like, okay, you went after him because he threatened your rise to the top. Then he absorbs and destroys Rene Russo, who is somewhat complicit. It's like a symbiotic but coerced thing. And then they give us the character Rick, who I genuinely feel, and in a very efficient way, it's like you need an innocent victim. And Rick is the innocent victim who he essentially plucks from nothing, completely absorbs, coerces. Like if he had never met him, he'd be alive to this day doing whatever. Just chancing upon Lou Bloom took this guy and completely derailed his life to the point that he's dead in the street. It's a great final nail in the coffin. And great ending.
Kind of echoed by the final line of the film, which is, and remember, I won't ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. Which is how he kills people, how he absorbs and dominates, is that he is willing to go farther than the other person, and he sees that as an inspiration, and that's
right.
toxic.
And in fact, if you'll, that's something I only noticed on this watch. In that scene, he walked in front of the line of fire first. It's true. Mm-hmm. Like he occupies geographically. I rewound to check the space that Rick occupies when Rick gets shot. So he just by chance, you know what I mean? The suspect could have woken up and shot him, but he didn't. And I think that's why Lou justifies to himself. That's another thing I think is really buttoned up in this movie is the sociopathic ability to justify why I'm not the bad guy. You see him go through that process in many instances where you get hints at that's why he thinks this is allowable, or that's the slight the person committed. Like, of course, I mean, so again, like a well-made movie, as the movie progresses, the subtext comes to the surface more and more so that you can't ignore it. And the crescendo is a moment where it's very clear. And that for this theme, that moment comes when he says to Rick, as he lies dying, "You took my bargaining power. You would have used it against me again. Just admit it." I don't know. It's okay. I know. And I just love that it's true. He wouldn't do he won't ask you to do something he wouldn't do. So he literally does it. And, everything hits. Everything's buttoned up. It's great. I worship at the altar of everything being where it should be.
Also, that in terms of my thing about him being like he's the embodiment of capitalism, he's voicing the concept of competition there, saying that, because I'm willing to go this far, you also must go this far. If you're going to make your product in a sweatshop with children, if I'm going to do that, now you have to do it, or else I'm going to undercut your price. And it's like, if I'm going to break into a house to get the video, if you want to compete with me, you have to do it. It's like, I'm not going to ask you to do anything I wouldn't do. But he's also saying that in this system, I established a baseline. This baseline is established by who's willing to go the farthest, who's willing to take it the furthest, who's willing to shed the most of their humanity, because where someone else would not, enter into that situation for fear of messing up the crime scene or endangering someone. It's like, no, I'm going to do it, and either you will do it or else you won't work for me, and you will, all the competition out there, you will lose to me.
Yeah. And it's double revealing, because not only is it that the system allows or enables people to move the ethical goalposts at willy-nilly, but also that when it's not just the society that has a flaw, it's also he is highly corrosive. So it's like, here's how the people, the sharks, the movers and shakers, I guess, of the industry will take advantage of it, and here's how they corrode the integrity of the job or the integrity of the community by taking advantage of this enormous flaw in the community.
Likewise,
which is like human nature. I mean, which is that we're fascinated by violence and death. Of course. I don't think you can blame humans for being fascinated by violence and death. What we need to find are systemic ways to... That doesn't mean you have to give it to us, a steady drip of fascinating, gory deaths, you know? You shouldn't always just get what you want, but it is in capitalism's nature for someone to find a way to anything that we crave, which includes fear. We, on some level, we become addicted to narratives that fill us with concern because it makes us feel secure that, well, at least I'm aware, right? At least I'm on guard. I got to watch the news and stay on guard for possible dangers. There's an addictive nature to that, and it sounds like local news is the breeding ground for it, but it seems to have at this point infested every strata of our thinking, at least in this country, which is, that's very interesting to me that like this movie is probably just missed the window where it doesn't have to go into the theme of anti-surveillance or because it was so crazy to me watching it in 2020, the scene where he goes to a pawn shop and buys a camcorder and just goes up to a crime scene and starts filming the police. That would be an act of BLM solidarity protest, right? Like if I drove by that guy today, I'd go, good on you, man. Yeah, defund the police, bro. Film them. Make sure we got cameras on them. And it almost has this whole resonance that I'm pretty sure is not intended. And like, I don't know I can't remember exactly what year this movie came out, but I feel like it came out just in time
2014
to not have to address that any later, and it would have been weird, or I don't know.
Yeah. I also have a sneaky suspicion that it works as a metaphor. I don't know if it was intended. It probably wasn't, but it's just right at the time where there's like a conversation about Facebook and this movie. It's like I keep thinking about it because considering it came out in 2014, it's about a sociopath who doesn't care about privacy or breaking laws in order to raise a business into the stratosphere, right? Mm-hmm. That it feels very much like, don't you see what's happening right now? Like in general, but obviously that's another reason that I think of it as like a love sonnet to Fincher, because it has that social contract aspect.
Fincher is concerned with social contracts. That's definitely true. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just in general, he's like, let's follow a villain, you know, because like Zuckerberg is the villain of that film. And it's just like, I don't know. It just seems very in tune with that time.
I also love that you said it's structurally Taxi Driver, because one of my notes in all capitals is this movie is so much better than Joker. But it reminds me of Joker in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's not just that he's in a car a lot.
No, it's that you're following a force of evil that you come to understand, and it has a societal message at the end. The Joker's was just like, don't be mean to me or I'll shoot you. It was just so basic to me. But I loved this one.
I 100% agree with that. I think I think somehow, even though this was made several years before, it's so much more relevant to 2020 than Joker is. Like Joker to me, and I know it's a beloved movie. Mm-hmm. It is. In my view, it is a writer who is not super adept at understanding people. It's like his explanation of what makes someone like the Joker, and I think he misses it completely. Whereas here, like Jake Gyllenhaal's character, if you're trying to build like a symptom of like this is a case study in what's wrong with the world, it's so much better, because the whole thing is he's just following incentives. He's just doing, he's going where the money is. And then even the thing, in terms of structure, like I think it's on the page 60, the turning point moment is when he enters the house where the shooting was. Isn't that about when that happens? Isn't that how they structured it?
Yes, and can I point something out that blew my mind? He literally, it's a shot where you're looking at him and he has the camcorder in his hand up to his eye, and he pans it from left to right. So for a split second, the camera pings camera, if you know what I mean. He is pointing the camera directly at us at the very instant that that he steps over the threshold and cannot return. He's literally becoming like the postcard symbol of, you're complicit in this too, because you're watching me watching you. And the music crescendos at that moment, like it's obviously intentional. And it's just like, man, I love a movie where you can pause it and be like, this is just a fucking political cartoon of what the movie's about. They gave us a postcard.
Yeah. And
that's a beautiful moment.
And it's the moment where instead of simply recording the violence, he starts taking part in it because he's going to intentionally omit some footage from this in order to cause another crime later that he can then film. He's basically going to create a situation, and that's the movie's thesis moment, because it would be one thing if you were just criticizing the audience for wanting violence and then they respond to that need by recording the violence that happens to be occurring. But there's a moment where the media's coverage of things, like we talk about it in mass shootings, like that they always occur in bursts because the next shooter wants that coverage and wants that fame. And suddenly you realize, oh, there's actually a moment where a place where the media coverage is triggering the phenomenon, where the media created the violence, and that the police's attitude toward certain people is based on what they themselves have seen on the news. And that when you have, a small town or a suburb who demands that their police act a certain way, it's based on what they saw on the news. And everything we cover, from school shootings to gang violence to drugs, everything else, it winds up precipitating what comes next, because the news is not occurring in a vacuum. Like, people react based on what they see. So they're the symbolism of, it's like the market can claim to be neutral. Like, hey, we're just giving people what they want. And it's like, no, capitalism creates wants and then turns around and acts blameless when it gives things to people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a process of normalization. You create people's perception of the world, which includes the things we want and what you should strive for. And of course, in America, the big overriding one that's sort of sewn into our DNA still is capitalism, because it's so foundational to our system, is getting the high score. It's a big deal for a lot of people. It's almost an American instinct, I think, to value people based on their position as far as like rags to riches, pulled themselves up by bootstraps. They're so rich now, you wouldn't even believe. They must be important. They must be really good.
And there's symbols, there's artifacts that reveal success to us.
Phrase,
stuff like a car or a girlfriend or a boyfriend.
The phrase, it's only business, is so weird to me. Wait, so you can do something evil or amoral because it's only business? Well, it's just business? What is that? Why? Why is business a place where you should be amoral? It still impacts the fabric of our reality and therefore our lives. Why is business exempt? I think that's a uniquely American idiom. It's just business.
Or if I trick you into paying 10 times more what something is worth, and I say, well, it's just business. It's like, no, I've harmed you. I have done harm to you. I tricked you into buying something worthless. I got you to buy
buyer beware.
This bottle of snake oil pills because I made you insecure about your weight. And then I gave you this weight loss herb that does nothing, and I charged $50 for it. And it's like, hey, nobody put a gun to his head. It's like, yes, you did. You sowed fear into this person and then turned around and sold them a cure to the fear. And it's the same thing with, I think that's why you need the character, Rene Russo's character. And her name, is it Nina?
Yeah, that's right.
It's Nina, yeah.
The reason you need her as a contrast is because in some ways she's profiting exactly the same way that Lou is. But she's in a place where she can still tell herself, look, the audience is garbage. They want blood and guts, so that's what I'm going to give them because that's my job. If I don't do it, they'll just hire somebody else. Like, she can kind of distance herself because, hey, I'm not causing the crime. Mm-hmm. But of course, when stuff starts coming in that could only have occurred if the person participated, she happily takes it. And it's almost like she faces this person who's kind of a mirror image of herself and shows her true face. It's like, this is the person you will not admit to being, which is that your audience fears crime because you fed that fear. Because if you have a newscast that does not have a death in it or some sort of tragedy, you freak out because you know your rating is going to be down. So you start every day with like, okay, what's the fire? What's the blood on the pavement that we can open this newscast with? And she's like screaming at him on the one episode they don't have that because it's going to tank their numbers. But the idea that she is creating her own demand for the product, she would easily like tell herself that's not true. But in the same way that, like selling an addictive substance to somebody, it's like, well, they can choose to just not smoke. It's like she's in a position where she can distance herself, and Jake Gyllenhaal's character is more honest because he just openly states, I'm going to do this because this will make me the most amount of money. And it's like just having him say out loud what all of them are actually doing is enough to be chilling.
Yeah. And we have a current president who out loud chose as his defense the line of thought, if you leave a legal loophole and I use it to steal millions of dollars, that's fine. You made the loophole. And that's crazy to me that we've reached the level of Americanness where like, that's right. He got his. That's correct to me. All's fair in business.
And it's not just him. People find that endearing. They find it as winning the system.
Right, gaming the system.
By doing stuff.
People love that. I also love how they execute that moment Jason's talking about with the only time she seems aroused by him. And it's shot in profile like they're about to kiss in like romantic silhouette. And she says...
Her tone changes. She's more breathy.
Yeah, she says, I want it, obviously. How much do you want it? You tell me. It's literally like their sex play is the fact that he's about to hand her a video that will get them a 10 share. It's great.
And he has pulled her down to where he is. And that's, that's the overarching point, that there's a gravity to people like this, the same as there's a gravity to a president like Trump. And I'm sure some listeners don't want to hear us get off on a Trump tangent, but the idea that subsequent presidents, you're almost now playing by Trump rules, because once he established that you can just do this and get away with it, it's like, this is the new rule now. Like it's harder. It's very hard to pull those norms up again. And so that's kind of the thing here, is like he has seduced her because she's seen like she's now in his world. And the thing is, by the end, he's employed people and told them, you're now living by my rules. And that's like the overall theme, is like there's this downward gravity to people like this.
Yeah. The story of American journalistic integrity, and I guess to, the world, is one of the most interesting narratives of our generation, or of the generations alive right now, because we're seeing basically this kind of like what Lou Bloom does in this movie is just constantly decimate the integrity of everything, the jobs that he arrives in. He's basically just raping the culture, and that is kind of what we have. Like, I remember it was like Cody, who was the first one who put in my head, Cody Johnston, he put in my head, like, when people are, like, when journalists are asking questions, at a press conference, and they don't slam, like, Trump or someone like that hard enough. And it's like, why aren't you asking the right questions? It's all so obvious. And he's just like, why don't we do that? And there is no answer. We don't. We have this system where we basically say this is the way things are done. This is how you treat people. And then people take advantage of that and use it for their own gain. It's just one of those things that I think is super salient and super true about life. And that's what makes it one of the better movies of I mean, it's 2014. With this and Whiplash, probably the two best films that I've seen in the last
since then
5-6 years.
Get Out comes to mind, but
but they nailed it.
And I think you're absolutely right that we're living at a time when humanity is grappling with and will either figure out or not its relationship to storytelling, because media, in the historical perspective, media is so dominant in our lives now. Humans love stories, and I love stories. It's the flow that I want to be a part of for the duration of my life. But at the same time, we sure have weaponized to like a Doritos flavor blasted bliss point level storytelling and media's ability to fabricate realities that don't actually exist in any way we want, to live in bubbles that are parallel universes that have no connection to anything but are reinforced by infinitely available self-reinforcing media. It's algorithm defined and shifted around, and it's just all It's crazy, man. And it's I do think that you're right that that's something notable about this time in human history. 100, 200 years from now, I think we'll be interested in how did we figure out whether storytelling poisons us or not. Is there a way around this?
Yeah.
Is
And
there a way around
fake
capitalism? Fake Facebook stories essentially are like ruining our brains. Yeah.
It's surprisingly on point for a 2014 film. Surprisingly.
Well, this is something that we talked actually a lot about when I was in journalism school, which is this concept of you are making a decision when you choose what stories you're telling. Like, you don't have to lie to people. You don't have to fabricate anything. You can create any reality you want just by carefully selecting what you tell people. And the moment, like for instance, the moment you lead off a newscast, like people assume that's the most important story, right? It's the lead story. The moment you put that story there, you have biased the audience because you have announced this is what's important. So no matter how you report it or what you say, the moment you put that shooting, or a drive-by shooting in your lead spot, you have told the audience, this is the most important thing that happened in the city today, which would be fine if you were trying to tackle some sort of real solution to that problem instead of just entertaining people by giving them action, by giving them pictures of bullet holes and broken glass, which makes for cool visuals and blood, bright red blood on the pavement. It just, if you were creating something that it's like, hey, here's how we need to attack this problem, instead of just saying the only solution to this problem is for you to keep watching our newscast. That's the thing. And the one, you can blow people away with this statistic, but the year that the Columbine shootings happened was in a year when we had seen, I think, an all-time low in school shootings, even with that added in. And you tell people that, they are like, well, how's that even possible? It's because a typical school shooting happens in the inner city between two minorities on a playground and a couple people getting shot, and nobody cares. That doesn't make the news. It only makes the news in terms of if it has a dramatic visual, or if there's some threat to, a tourist is killed, a white person is killed.
They were white and they were wearing black trench coats. It has visual appeal, so to speak.
Yeah. And so the idea that, oh my gosh, a shooting on our sacred school grounds, that there are now guns in our schools. It's like, okay, there are schools in inner cities that had metal detectors at the doors to stop kids, because every kid had a gun.
Long before Columbine.
Before Columbine, yeah. And, in the 80s and 90s, and, as cities descended into violence, and you have these neighborhoods where the news crews just don't ever go unless it's like on safari. Like, look at this exotic location where all the houses are falling apart and all the apartment buildings are all run down. Like, it's just a backdrop instead of, look, this is a blight on our city that we've allowed this to happen. What can we do? So the idea is that you never heard about it when it was in, Compton, or name your city that was in rough shape back in the 90s. But then the moment it happens in this, Colorado suburb, it's like, oh my gosh, it happened here, like among these type of people, among, people with white upper middle class parents. And the implication is, well, now it's important. See, now it's a problem. Now we got it. And so we did all of this completely stupid and pointless, like anti-bullying stuff, even though the Columbine shooters were not bullied. But it doesn't matter. The fact that they were bullied goths, that was a story that the local news came up with basically in the parking lot. That was the narrative they wanted to tell. And the fact that, the violence had been rampant for decades, that it had, been something that they had been working on behind the scenes, and that we had kind of otherwise hid it from view. It wasn't a story till it came to the suburbs.
How goddamn irresponsible.
Well,
yeah, that's fascinating stuff.
On my end, there was a dog barking mournfully in the distance. I really hope that carried over in that silent beat.
That was actually my dog. Could you hear it over my mic? Is that?
Oh, nice.
Did it ruin the mood of what I was trying to say, or did the dog?
I think it punctuated it perfectly. It's like the dog barking at the end of the trial when the guy gets shot.
Yeah. What else, guys?
I have a few more notes I'd love to go through of just stuff I appreciated on this watch that I saw for the first time. You'll unlock the whole movie if you just go in thinking, all right, he's a coyote. There's a lot there. But aside from that stuff, I loved how many instances there are of frames where we see it's like constantly you are looking at, it's like the X's in The Departed. You're looking at that sign that with the symbol of 2 lanes merging or 2 lanes splitting. That's everywhere. Mm-hmm. And of course it culminates in the thing I got on the first viewing, because it's very in your face of like the horror is he's dividing, the final shot where the 2 vans split off and go in opposite directions. It's like he's spreading the infection, the blood cells split and it went down 2 arteries. But I didn't notice till this viewing that they foreshadow that constantly with the merge sign. And I love that the merge sign, well, what does the merge sign represent? Opportunities for a car crash. That's the most frequent place you're going to crash, is merging or trying to split. I wanted to talk about the score, because the first time I saw this movie, I thought its one flaw was the score. And Jen, who is more music minded than film minded, all she could think about was how she hates the score and thinks it ruins the movie because it doesn't fit the scary mood. But I realized something this time, and I turned to her and I was like, I take it back. I love the score. It's perfect. I wouldn't change a note because
I love the score.
It's the movie he thinks he's in.
Exactly.
Every time the score builds and it's like fucking explosions in the sky music when they win the big football game, but it's when he is finally successfully coercing someone into humiliating themselves and just giving him what he wants.
Like when he moves the bodies in the crash.
It's like inspirational music, like you're watching.
It's like Friday Night Lights.
Will Smith in Happiness, like solve a Rubik's Cube. Yeah. And I thought it was clashing until I realized, oh, that's what he thinks is, he's like, my career is blossoming. It's great. This is great. So now I love the score. Of course, we got to mention the line, what if it wasn't that I don't understand people, but instead that I don't like them, which is just chilling. The other line I wrote down that I just think is a great piece of screenwriting, because I'm a sucker for when the Coen brothers do this all the time, when dialogue is really repetitive, but in a way that doesn't seem forced. But when you think about it, you go, it's crazy how many times I said...
It's forced.
Yeah, it's there's an Office line where he's like, I can't believe that I just said that I said that, or whatever. And then, Jen came in to tell me some dog news. Editor, I think you'll have to cut that out. That was too awkward.
Okay.
But anyway, and now I'm going to find the note. Okay, so I love when they repeat dialogue. I just repeated myself. Fitting. Anyway, the line is, what if by saying, no, you fuck it up? Is that what you're saying? I didn't say that. Well, I don't know what to say.
Well, I don't know what to say.
I love how when that plays out, you just don't notice that it's so repetitive.
Right, yeah.
It rhymes, as what's his name would say. Okay, last but not least, I saved my favorite note for the end. I find it very rare that a film is able to empathize with sociopathy. And by empathize, I mean the dictionary definition of like see the world effectively with nuance through their eyes from their experience. Because let's remember that being sociopathic must be terrible, a terrible feeling, I imagine. And it's a mental illness that exists and some people are afflicted with. It's a mental illness that we are scared of, and that could be part of a misleading narrative. I read a very interesting piece years ago that really stuck with me about how a lot of sociopaths who have been diagnosed and know that they're sociopaths run Fortune 500 companies, but don't, and are embarrassed, don't admit to people that they don't feel emotions, but it does there tend to be a lot of highly successful sociopaths because they sort of replicate, I guess the working theory is, in the absence of normal emotional, like we get dopamine hits from emotional interaction and they don't. They get dopamine hits through success and victory and competition. So it becomes, that's what I do because that's what gives me pleasure. And the moment when he is in the film studio and looks around in wonder and says, on TV, it looks so real. That moment brought, like, I got tears in my eyes because of the beauty of, like, the art I was witnessing. Because to me, that is an act of filmmaking empathy. Because to understand sociopathy on such a deep level as to make the character who's the sociopath, he's wowed by, it's the most emotion we ever see from him. He's like touched.
Right.
And he's wowed by, it's the only time he doesn't derive pleasure from conquering something. He's wowed in the way of, like, he's in a cathedral. Like, he's in awe of the fact that there's a discrepancy between what media represents and what it really looks like. He literally loves the difference between reality and storytelling, because that's what he is. Like, he lives his life playing in the difference between what's true and just what he's going to present to the outside world, as all sociopaths, or most sociopaths, find themselves imitating human emotion, which he does constantly to manipulate people.
I really give it to Gyllenhaal for that moment, because you do get the sense that it's not a thing that he's doing to look the part. Like,
it's his only genuine moment.
It's actually genuine. You feel it, and that's a subtle nuance to play.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was intended, because I got it, and the filmmakers here are, very subtle, with that kind of stuff.
He's in love with media because it can manipulate people, and he empathizes with that. That's so cool.
Yeah. Manipulation incarnate. Yeah. It's kind of a wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice
he's like
touch.
at the altar of what is his God, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Fucking good movie.
Ooh-wee.
Do either of you have things that you do think are flaws, or you wish the movie had executed differently?
Personally, no. This is one of
question.
that's why I like, there's no such thing as there's a favorite movie, but there's no best movie, because they can talk about so many things, of course, but I think it's a flawless movie. I can't find a misstep, other than it would just be adding things that it's like you could add that, but for efficiency's sake, you don't have to.
Yeah, it's tough to discuss films in that way for me as well, because of what Mike just said. The only addition I'd give is that it definitely does feel like it's made of things that came before it, but I don't think that that's particularly a bad thing. I mean, there's a reason why I think it's like a love song to Fincher, and it feels like it's a Fincher-esque protagonist, but I think that's all intentional. I think it's supposed to make you go, these themes are universal.
Mm-hmm.
This is a song that plays on a loop, and so seeing the city look like that, the lenses, all the way down to the lenses that they choose to shoot it, all feel very intentional and tempered, which is what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Was there anything that you got hung up on, Jason? I mean, I feel like, coming from the local news yourself, you probably witnessed, like you said, there were some exaggerations that we wouldn't have noticed.
Well, yeah, and that part, that's fine. I mean, it's a movie, it's because obviously in real life you do have disincentive. Like, if you get caught doing certain things, you can, like the stations could be punished, their FCC license could be threatened. Like, there are things keeping it in check. Like, it serves more as a metaphor than anything. But there's a couple things that are minor. One, the opening scene where he's selling the scrap and he gets caught because he's literally just stealing their fence. Isn't he just
some manhole covers, some copper wiring? Yeah.
Yeah. Before he sells it, he gets caught by a security guard, and they show him, like, to get away, he attacks the guy, and it cuts to black, but it shows him.
Takes his watch.
Yes, you see him wearing the guy's watch. I would not have included that, because I think it's better, the structure I discussed, where it's a slow burn, where you realize what that boundary where he directly attacks somebody and maybe kills him, or whatever they imply there, is one that he doesn't cross again. In terms of the arc you're trying to display, I felt like that was them
You're absolutely right. You could have cut that. It would have been stronger, yeah.
But I think in modern filmmaking, where you have to do like that in media res thing, where you've got to have some action at the beginning to grab the viewer, and then you can do the slow burn. I think if they had made this movie in the 70s, you don't get that. You see him, he's kind of a loser, he's trying to make money, and then you see him cross these boundaries, and you realize, oh, I'm watching a monster here. And the slow reveal of that, I don't know that an audience in 2014, like any focus group they showed this to, like by the time he starts really crossing boundaries, because it's like 50 minutes into the movie where he forces her to like have sex with him. It's 60 minutes in where he basically breaks into an active crime scene. Yeah. Like that's a long time to make people wait. Now, just the way, because like horror movies, same thing. Like they've got to have an opening scene where you see the monster, and then they'll circle back to the family moving into the house. You can't just open on a family moving into the house, because audience will sit there and say, what, this is just a movie about a family that moves into a house? It's like, no, hold on. They'll get to the ghost. It's a slow burn. And then the other thing is, I feel like Jake Gyllenhaal plays this he is so creepy and reptilian and everything about his hair and his eyes. And I know he put a tremendous effort into everything from his posture to the frequency with which he blinks or doesn't blink. None of that stuff is natural to Jake Gyllenhaal. That is him wearing the suit of a creepy slime ball. I personally think it's scarier if he looks completely normal. If he just looks like a guy, but that's, again, they wouldn't allow me to make a movie like this.
Oh, he does seem creepy, yeah, inherently.
Because, and he's like transparent. Like he's the type of person, if he showed up at your house in the middle of the night, you would not open the door for him because he looks crazed. Oh, no. He's got that weird.
Yeah, his eyes are too big.
Yeah, he like doesn't know what to do with his face, and everything about his mannerisms is kind of creepy and oily and alien. Whereas if he's just not even like an over the top, because he's not going to be charismatic, but if he's just like kind of a quiet, normal person who's just struggling to get by, and it's slowly unveiled what he is. To me, that's scarier, because the whole point is that you don't wear your sociopathy on your face. You don't wear the things that are broken in your brain don't always show, or else society would be completely different. Right. That's actually one of the weird things about Trump, is that he looks like what he is. It's actually fascinating that it actually did bubble to the surface of his skin. What's scary about society is that so often, actually, now that I was going to use Mark Zuckerberg as an example of someone who looks normal but is actually not. But actually, no, he's also creepy.
You can tell he's a creep.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Harvey Weinstein, no, you could tell. You can kind of tell a lot of the time. Like Danny DeVito seems like a sweetheart. No, so it goes that way. Can it go the other way?
But anyway, I guess just from a cinematic point of view, my whole thing where I want the slow unveiling of what he is, that it's better if he looks completely normal. Yeah. He's not, but again, that's, I think if you talk to someone who actually knows what they're doing in film in terms of costume and stuff like that, like I think Jake Gyllenhaal knows a little bit more about how to play a character.
Because then you're losing the fact that he actually emanates a scary energy keeps you invested from scene to scene. It keeps you remembering what he is.
Yeah, it's just the role. It's just who he's playing. I don't know. I want to defend the beginning of the movie. I don't think you can cut it. I'd prefer.
Can you see how it elegantly makes the ramp up perfectly smooth if you do cut it?
Yes and no. Because then you lose it. Because the movie's already bookended between that and the result, which is the final scene. What I like about the first scene is that it shows where he came from, which is like petty crime. And that's like a necessary piece of the puzzle for me. The other thing is to the argument that the violence is like singular and like out of place relative to the crimes that he does later. I think it's just the world he's infiltrating during the span of the movie that doesn't allow just like blanket assault. That's for streets and in like the shadows. You can get away with that stuff. So we know what kind of predatory beast Lou Bloom is. It's just that he can't evoke he can't use all of that strategy in the rest of the movie because he's surrounded by cops. He's, but if it's a rent-a-cop, he'll beat him up and take his watch. Yeah, that's the kind of guy we're dealing with. So I see how it is smooth in terms of like you would start from
you would be more surprised
and go to 100, but like I don't think I think it's fine to not it's fine to not start at 0. It's fine to start at a place where it's like, okay, this guy's even lower than what like a blank slate would be. This guy is an actual villain. I think that is necessary in kind of bookending the movie with his success and saying that like, yes, and it was good story, right? He did a good job. You rooted for him. Yeah. It sends that message and delivers home kind of the satire of it. So yeah, that's just my defense of it.
Not too shabby. As I said or referenced earlier, I think my only issue would be it's weird to me that someone filming cops is evil, but I don't think there's any implication that they're trying to make there. I think it's just a thing I think now because of 2020 and I'm looking back at it.
Yeah.
I'm like, do film the cops.
Do film the cops.
But don't harass the guy who's on the phone with 911 though. Don't drag the body. And so on.
Don't drag the body.
You never drag the body.
That's where they get you. When you start dragging
bodies. And then does he cause someone to die or just allow them to die?
There's just someone dying and he films it.
Because I didn't notice anyone being alive, but he says to Rick someone was alive in the house. And I didn't even notice that.
I think the first body not the first body, because there's the entryway is the guy on the ground. I think the woman
on the couch
you can see slight breathing.
Man, the way the news anchors, it feels so realistic. They cast great news anchor types, didn't they? But the way the news anchors talk about the baby crib is so fucking morbid and opportunistic. It's like grotesque.
And I also love that the guy's reminder of like video production news every
professional news gathering service.
Yeah.
Lou Bloom, you won it all.
Yeah. I mean, that is over the top. I guess that's a criticism, but I think it's supposed, that's what you're supposed to do.
No, the end has to be he's triumphant. I love it.
Yeah.
Speaking of triumphant endings, my butt. Jason, please. Let me ask you this first. Will we ever hear from you again? Or after this slew of promotion for your book, is it done? Are you hanging up the podcasting spurs?
No, it's by its law that I have to be on podcasts every now and then, just as a white person in my field. It's actually, I can go to jail if I don't do podcast. If I don't have my own, then it's like, well, at the very least, you have to be on other people's.
Well, consider us your parole officers, so we'll have you back soon. But I know you're here with a very particular agenda. Please deploy it now.
I've got a brand new book out called Zoe Punches the Future in the Dick, which
we'll bleep that.
Pick this, because this is a family show. They picked this movie because it's a science fiction novel. It takes place in a future where basically everyone willingly has a camera on them. That there's kind of like an internet of cameras where all the feeds are connected and you can kind of see anything at any time. And among other things, is kind of an exploration of what that does to the world. And it's a world where you step out of your door and you are performing. You are on camera. You are now playing a character. And so the title being Zoe Punches the Future in the Dick, you can derive a lot about the tone of the book from that title. But that's part of why I want to talk about this, because it gets into themes like that. And it's a world in which people stage elaborate crimes, partly because it is instant worldwide fame. And, this is a world in which when there's a car chase You don't need a helicopter chasing it, as the news stations in LA will have.
Yeah.
It shows up on this network of everybody's camera feeds, because it just hops from as long as there's a camera nearby, and there would be one on the car and one on the utility poles, and every security camera they pass and every person they pass is wearing a little camera. You can just follow the feed from person to person, and basically the internet of that era is just it's like a God's eye view of whatever you want to be looking at. You can search for an event and go, whoever's got a camera nearby, you're now watching it through their camera. So it's kind of this series of books. It's the second one, but you can start with any of them. But it kind of is an exploration of partly of what it means to live in a world where that's true.
And chillingly plausible trends, right? Or I feel like that's a hallmark of the series now. I mean, there's only 2, but like,
yeah. But like when I wrote the first one,
they're in a sort of a crackty style. You're extrapolating things that you think are somewhat believable, right?
Yeah. And when I wrote the first one, like Ring doorbells did not exist. That's a product that came on the market about a year after the first book is called Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. And like a year later, everyone starts buying these cameras to put on their own doorbell. And then 2, now you can go online and like browse people's doorbell cameras.
You're very Jules Verne. Yeah, that's kind of what I was driving at. Is you are one of the sci-fi authors who is playing in the near enough future with real enough concepts that you will no doubt predict a bunch of technology that ultimately comes to pass, because sci-fi authors do that left and right. And I've read both books and they're phenomenal. And a lot of it is chillingly plausible, and then there's aspects of it that are entirely impossible.
But they're not depressing. I don't want people.
No, it's not 1984 vibes or anything at all.
No, they're fun. That's why the title is what it is, because I'm trying to convey this is, in some ways, it is an escape from the 2020. There's not like that President Donald Trump.
It's not Nightcrawler.
It's not. You're not having to like. There's not like a parallel to. I know we've got to impeach the whatever. The
Cheeto Man.
It's someone like the tone someone compared to like Futurama, where it's dark, but it's also
hard
something
sci-fi.
ridiculous.
There's a core of hard sci-fi.
But it's fun. I wrote it as an escape from what was going on. It cracked. So hopefully it will serve as an escape for other people. That's one of the things that drives me as a storyteller, is that the idea you can pick up a book and forget about the world for a while.
Absolutely. Where can people, is there a best place to pick it up, or should they just Google the title?
Can support your local bookstores, but don't put your life at risk. Whatever method you feel safest, don't worry about like what helps me the most. If you don't like Amazon, it's fine. They should have it everywhere there's books, aside from like grocery stores and stuff. Like any bookstore should have it. If not, they can absolutely get it for you. It's a mainstream release in hardcover. The other one, depending on when you hear this, it's the first book in the series is probably $2.99 on Kindle right now. They always discount it around the release of a new book, so you can get it dirt cheap. But if you want to start with the second one, it's fine too. It's not like a Song of Ice and Fire thing where a book ends on like a cliffhanger and then picks up. Each one is its own thing.
Well, gosh, Jason, thank you for being here.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I hope we had intelligent things to say about this movie, a movie that I think most people in your listenership probably have not seen.
You think not? That's what I was just trying to guess that, yeah, in my mind.
Because I just stumbled across it a couple of years ago on streaming. It just popped up in one of the modules on Amazon Prime. Totally missed it when it was out. I mean, this is something that's an actor I like. This is a subject. It's a genre I like. It's a subject I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. But in this media environment, you can so easily miss things.
Oh, you can miss great stuff so easy. Yeah.
So, this popped up on, it's like, oh, you like this other thriller. Well, maybe you'll like this. And from the thumbnail, it looked like, oh, it's Jake Gyllenhaal playing the creepiest serial killer he can or something like that. It's like, that sounds fun. And no, it's like, oh, gosh.
But don't miss really Zoe Punches the Future in the Dick, or Nightcrawler, or Small Beans over at patreon.com/cough. Hey. And that's an episode, as Tom Ryman would say. Mm-hmm. That's a so. Goodbye, everybody.
We love you.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!